Funny story, I talked to my son and he was using a lot of data on his mobile subscription. I wonder what is he doing? And then I realized after a while that he was actually listening to music through YouTube. I didn't even know you could do that, but he's doing that. And basically he listened to music, he put the song on YouTube, which is basically a video then, and then put the phone in his pocket and just listen to the music. So he streams continuously every day for hours because he listens to music.
Welcome to another episode of Transmissions from Tomorrow, the show that gives you an inside route to the people driving the digital transformation of business and technology in the world of telecommunications. And I'm your host, Dez Blanchfield. Today I have the pleasure of having in the studio with me Patrik Cerwall. Patrik, how are you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Patrik, you're the head of strategic marketing for the business area network section of Ericsson. That must be an exciting role for you to hold these days.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of things that we work on, a lot of things that we look forward to, and things are happening in this mobile industry, which I'm a part of all the time. So we try to do our best to see what happens in the future.
So you head up the team that works within the strategic marketing section of the business area networks. You've got an amazing a list of things that you do. I'm just going to rattle a couple off here. You're the executive editor for the international award-winning Ericsson Mobility Report that just got published, which I think I've rabbit-eated crazily. I've made notes through it all, which we'll come back to. You joined Ericsson in 1995, I think it was, and you've had a whole range of exciting roles, which we'll talk about. Although I think it was from 2006 you started working within the strategic marketing area focused on essentially establishing Ericsson as a thought leader in the mobile industry. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And that's what I've tried to do since then.
That's an exciting challenge. You also represent Ericsson as the vice president of an industry forum called the Global Mobile Suppliers Association. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Global Supply Mobile Association is a supplier association, as you can imagine, between Ericsson, Qualcomm, Intel, Samsung, Huawei, and Nokia. And we are basically there sitting together trying to talk about the things that actually are common, that we try to drive as an industry. It could be things related to spectrum issues. It could be things related to new technology coming up. We're in a transition to 5G. There's a lot of things that is common that we, as a team of vendors, need to work on together. Standardization is extremely important for this business, and that's what we try to support as an industry.
Absolutely, and I think as late as probably 1998, and they're on was it 1989? I think it was the establishment of sort of what became the GSM network carriers, and particularly telco infrastructure and hardware and software and services providers. Probably worked out that things are going to be better if they all work together. Even though you compete in certain market segments, you're all working on the same basic challenge, right?
Yes, exactly.
Now,
that's what we try to do.
You hold a Master of Science from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, and I was amazed when I read that you've got 10 patents that have been awarded to you in the field of mobile comms and systems. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, those were the early days of my engineering career. When I started at Ericsson, I was part of a system engineering team, and we tried to develop features and functions for the newly released the GSM system. And I got the opportunity to work on a number of very interesting software projects where we tried to develop new functions that never been there before. And at that time, we then tried to also to put down our ideas. That could be even high and low, crazy in some time, but sometimes really on the spot of what we need to do. And some of those actually went all the way to become applications for patent and also approved.
Right. It's interesting that, in a lot of this industry, particularly around technology, not so much in the services space or banking and finance, but certainly telco, I find that folk who come from a very technical pedigree and then move into the business areas can really hold their own when they sort of, go to toe-to-toe with technical and design and engineering people if they've come from that background. Have you found that to be the case, that now that you're in a business-focused role, heading up the strategic marketing part of the business area network section of Ericsson, that it's held you in good stead that you've got a technical background and engineering background as opposed to maybe an MBA type background?
Well, I think for me it has helped a lot, especially in a company that is so technology focused like Ericsson, we tend to start with products. And I think, I mean, going now into marketing role that I have, working on putting the brand out, driving brand marketing, then understanding that products often form the brand is very important. So you have to start with the product. What is it that the company actually do? And understanding that is key to understand then how to form your marketing around that. So I think it has helped me a lot to have that background.
It was interesting. I had the pleasure, as you know, when we met a couple of days ago, to have an inside behind-the-scenes tour of the Ericsson studio with yourself and a team from the various parts of Ericsson, particularly the digital business part of it. And what really struck me was, in many ways, a lot of what you're doing is kind of acting like a startup within a legacy business. There's a lot of really big shifts with digital disruption and transformation inside the business. And so I imagine some of the technical background, some of the engineering background gives you a good, strong foundation built on that. Now, the other thing I was interested in learning, you're as far as outside work, you've got a whole range of interesting hobbies that I'd love to hear a little bit about. You mentioned you're a big golfer, that you love jazz music, and that occasionally you kick back and read a book, and you're into crime and mystery. Give us a bit of insight into Patrik the man.
Oh, well, I would say like this. I mean, I'm not a strong golfer. I'm a very committed golfer. And I think golf is one of those sports you actually need to be very committed, regardless how it works. So I'm not specifically good, but I really love the game. And I think it's because you get this kickback whenever you actually fire a shot or get something to work, then you're starved for that moment. And then the rest of the round can go really bad, but it doesn't matter. You've done one shot that would have fit to the PGA Tour. So that's kind of the kind of golfer I am. So not a good golfer, but a very committed one. And I think that in some way goes across other things that I do. I try to do it more based on commitment and because I really get into. I mean, I'm becoming a nerd in different areas, even when it comes to listen to music. You find one artist and then you really listen to everything about that artist. And then you go on and do the same thing for books. You read everything for one author and so on. So that's a little bit the person I am.
It's I always laugh when folk tell me they're a golfer, but that they admit that they are kind of a hack in the most positive way. I'm very much the same. I would love to be playing off a single digit handicap, but that's a long pipe dream. But it's interesting that listening to what you're saying there about golf, it seems that in many ways it's one of those things where, like many lessons in life, isn't it, that as you said, you can have one really great hole and then the rest can fall apart, but you've got to walk away with it focusing on the one that really went well and not let the other ones drag you down.
Exactly.
I'm really keen to get some insight into kind of the actual role you do. So, I think a lot of people believe they understand marketing and they understand the strategic component of marketing. Could you maybe just give us a bit of insight in kind of, what does it actually mean to be the head of strategic marketing, and specifically inside that world of business area networks that you're in? Can you tell us a little bit more about what that actual role entails, and what does a day in the life of Patrik inside that role look like?
Yeah, maybe I should start then also to say, I mean, the reason that this fits me so well is because, I mean, given my technical and engineer background, I always loved the fact that I could explain complicated things for an audience about what actually happened, whether it be a customer meeting or an internal discussion or even a talk. If you had the chance to actually explain complicated technology in an easy way so people get it, for me, that's one of the biggest rewards I can get. And that actually led me to do marketing in a technology company, because I really love the fact that we can do simplification and easy messages that still entails the whole complexity of the industry. So I think that's what drives me a lot in my role as strategic marketing. And that's what I try to also do in my team and push that through, and even in the reports.
Yeah. In fact, when I look at some of the latest achievements you've done, the one that really jumps out at me that you've recently released was the Ericsson Mobility Report for 2017. Tell us a little about what's involved in putting that together, and maybe a little bit of the history of how it came about being.
Yeah, I mean, when we started this was back in 2011. We had a situation in the company where we had a lot of data, a lot of insights, a lot of business intelligence material about what actually happens in in our networks and in the mobile space and so on. But we didn't utilize that. So we didn't have any way to put it together. We didn't have any way to talk about it. So no one really knew about it. Not even our own salespeople knew that we had this information, which meant that basically we had enormous fragmented messages and so on. So I got the task to actually put together that data into a report that actually could drive both the understanding of what we as Ericsson know and the facts we have, but also then help to have one message from a company point of view. So that we started, and the journey since then has been amazing. I mean, we released this report the first time in November 2011 under a different name. It was a different setting, and we learned from our mistakes and changed it. You know, the first report we came up with, the name was Traffic and Market Data Report. And the funny thing is that no one could remember that name. Not even our CEO trying to talk about it. So we had to change it.
Right. Well, it certainly rolls off the tongue more smoothly when you call it the Ericsson Mobility Report. It's as I said earlier, I've read the thing like about 10 times end to end in detail, but probably read each section dozens of times. What really surprised me was and I've gone and gotten copies of it over the previous years just to get some context of how it's growing. What really surprised me about this year in particular, after reading the last 2 or 3 years, was two things actually. Firstly, the shift in focus to predominantly mobile and mobile subscribers. That was a really big shift, and I think that's been a global trend that we're all tracking. And also the whole introduction of the IoT and Internet of Things and digitization. There's been that sort of signal for a number of years, but it really jumped out this year. Were there particular areas that this year that you found jumped out or were introduced that hadn't necessarily been big focus areas for previous years?
I think we tried to track these things for a number of years, but the development goes so fast now. So there is IoT update. We're still forecasting quite a lot of IoT coming the next couple of years, but still it's happening now. It's starting to come out different ways. We have new technology on the market. Yes, we have 4G, which allows many of these IoT connections to be set up. But also the traffic increase, the sheer traffic increase in the networks is amazing. And I think that's one of the key things that always amazes me. Even though I look at these numbers, every month and look at the data that comes from the network, the enormous hunger for mobile data that we as a population of the earth basically have as a human race. It's amazing. We can never get enough of data, it seems.
Well, it is, and I mean, we could probably do a whole show on that topic alone. But I think when we look at regions, I track 3 really big regions globally in one particular sector. What I do, sort of wearing a market analyst hat or a data scientist hat, and particularly Africa, India, and China. And one of the things I'm seeing with what you're talking about there, with the hunger for mobile data, has been stemmed from the fact that for, let's say, 2.5 decades, the rest of the West, let's say, has had dial-up modem internet, and then let's say ADSL and ISDN type technologies in business. But some of those areas of going from zero to hero overnight, where they've had nothing, and then all of a sudden there's been cellular coverage in various forms by companies like yourselves at Ericsson roll it out, and all of a sudden they've jumped straight to a smartphone or a handset. And it's like they've woken up, and so we're almost like waking up a giant. Because when you think of those populations, I mean, 1.1 billion people in Africa and 1.3 billion people in India and 1.5 billion in China alone. Even if 10%, I mean that's 3.8 billion. Even if 10% of those people, which is nearly 4 billion people, were to be enabled, as I think you talked about 5.5 billion new subscriptions in the report. I mean, that's 3 or 4 orders of magnitude more than we're doing currently in just raw connectivity, let alone bandwidth. I mean, how do you even grasp that sort of statistic? How do you sort of wake up one day and go, wow, we're going to grow to 5 billion subscribers in the next couple of years? What does that even feel like?
Yeah, and it becomes even more amazing when you start thinking about what that actually means per day. We will see every day from now on up to 2022, 2023, 1 million new mobile broadband subscribers every day.
Wow. Well,
so today, yesterday, tomorrow, there will be 1 million new people on Earth having mobile broadband. And mobile broadband is basically then the smartphone having access to internet and so on. So we are connecting the world literally every day.
Well, in fact, here's the scary statistic. I mean, there's 23 million people in Australia in total. And there's cities like Shanghai that have 33.6 million in them. And I know there's cities in Europe that have got more than 23 million people. On a good day, Tuesday to Wednesday during lunch, Manhattan Island in New York can have 25 million people walking down the street looking for a sandwich for lunch. So what we're really talking about is the whole population of Australia on a monthly basis being added to the network. I mean, it's just phenomenal. In your traffic section, mobile traffic by application category, what was interesting was, we've got some obvious ones like file sharing and web browsing and software download and audio that we're familiar with. Social networking that I guess we sort of expected was going to be big. But I don't know that a lot of us really expected video to be quite so magnificently huge. I mean, it's like 48% of the traffic predicted between 2017 and 2023 in your report. And we're getting to the point where 50% of the world's traffic is going to be video. This whole thing that we talk about, the pivot to video, quote unquote, I mean, that's already happened, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does. And to be clear, I mean, when we talk about video, it's basically all kinds of video, even videos that is within the social media. All that video we count as video. But still, we see an increase of 50% roughly every year up to 2023. So by that time in 2023, we'll have 75% of all the traffic in all networks going to be video. But I think it also changes. If you look back a few years, we had the likes of Netflix and other streaming services coming on board, and people were uptaking more and more. Basically, viewing time increased, and people were getting more and more content on different parts. But I think what will happen in the end of this, which actually grow the traffic even more on video, is new types of video. We are broadcasting live much more. We do Periscope or Facebook Live, or we do, and then at the end of this period, we're probably going to do virtual reality and augmented reality and all these extra things that actually come on top of it, or 360 degrees videos. You go into a video stream and you can actually turn around the camera yourself. So that type of video applications will definitely be there, and I think that will drive traffic even further.
Well, absolutely, and if you look at some of the data you've got that you publish online around some of the migrational activity, through Middle East and certainly Asia and China, you've got seasonal migration for holidays, and some of the data coming out of, say, even India and China, where hundreds of millions of people over a weekend go back to wherever they might have come from, as far as either a village or a small town or a regional area, visit their relatives and then go back to the cities. And when you talk about hundreds of millions of people moving over a 24 to 48 hour period, and the data having to shift with it, I can't even imagine what happens to the networks with that. But you're right about the embedded.
You need to have good coverage.
Well, you need
for sure.
You need to have an enormous coverage and a lot more Ericsson hardware and software.
Yeah.
There was an interesting thing that came up yesterday in one of the conversations with Mats around the shift to cloudification, and talking about some of that big coverage. Not only does it seem you have to have a significantly larger coverage and fatter pipes, as it were, sort of on the internet per se, but also the shift in the types of traffic. I mean, it's one thing you talk about change in video and social media, but also when you digitize something, let's say we take a bridge and we put 10,000 sensors on it to see if it's going to fall down or if it's healthy, particularly with the rollout of IoT. We've also now got a shift where, I know when we were there the other day with the behind-the-scenes tour of the digital business group and particularly the studio, we saw a whole new bunch of thinking around the instantiation of services, the cloudification of things. There must be a massive shift to transform everything from physical servers and virtual machines to cloudification and turning things into microservices. What does that look like in your world when you're having to, I guess, have one foot in the old school where people have still got some legacy infrastructure, and they're making the rapid transformation into not just inside Ericsson, but also the business partners and customers you're working with that are buying your stuff. When they want it as a service, they want, if there's another 10 million subscribers wanted to watch a Netflix movie, they need to move that traffic and move that service almost instantly. Because I remember a couple of years ago when Netflix became legally available in Australia, we had a 45 or 46% increase on international internet bandwidth overnight. It literally doubled the Australian internet bandwidth usage with one application on smartphones. What does that look like in the transition from old thinking and design patterns to new design patterns in your world, and how do you communicate that from both a marketing point of view and a sort of thought leadership point of view?
Yeah, I think you're completely right. There is a lot of transition happening, and the cloud services will be more and more present in all kinds of different varieties of world where services that we use. So of course that will impact a lot. And I think our job here is try to explain how this world changes, how the evolution of different use cases may impact networks, and how operators and networks need to prepare in order to be able to cope with that. But it's also explaining a little bit about the world that will be in some way. So explaining that these services will be there, and then people will take them for granted in a way that aren't doing it today. And on top of that, there will be a number of disruptions. Talk about people traveling across China for seasonal holidays. I mean, there's always things that happen. Just in India, take that as an example. The last year, basically, they have had a new entrant coming, new operator that have started and offering free services for a number of months. And that in itself changed the whole scale of the amount of traffic on the global stage in the world.
Yeah.
They actually managed to rise the growth curve of traffic in the world by doing one offer. So things will happen and disruption will change, whether it's cloud, whether it's new offerings, whether it's new technology. All these things you have to be prepared, but you can't really forecast them.
No, I can only imagine. There must be days where you just sit there, in some cases, pulling your hair out because there's so much disruption and change. And in other cases, getting very, very excited. And I guess that's in many ways, certainly for myself, and I'm sure it's you as well, some of the reason that we jump out of bed and do what we do in various roles is that, there's so much positive in the future for us versus what, a lot of naysayers, a lot of haters, as they say, they don't want the change, they don't want the transition, they don't want to least shift. But when we look at the positive impact of switching on big chunks of India or big chunks of China or big chunks of Africa, and they get to join the rest of the world, I mean, there's just so much positive to be done by delivering that. Now, I'm really keen to throw a fun challenge at you. We talked earlier on about the whole mobile and telecoms industry, and in many ways it can be described as a super tanker, and that is that as an industry, it's a very big thing. It's a big beast, and it's very hard to turn around. Some of the changes, some of the transitions and shift in new thinking, new communications, new technology is all hard to bring about. They don't happen overnight. If I was to hand you a crystal ball and sort of say to you, hey, Patrik, could you just have a bit of a gaze in here and what do you think is over the horizon in the next 3 to 5 years, both for you and Ericson in general, sort of big ideas and trends? What would that sound like? What big things do you think are coming at us in various forms?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that if you set aside our forecast and then don't look so much about that, but seeing as how the world will change the next 3 to 5 years, I think one thing that for me sticks out all the time, and then we touched upon, is basically how mobile technology and smartphones are changing people's lives.
Yeah.
In the sense that I mean, there are so many people out there that still do not have access to the internet. We can connect these that are just to afford the mobility. If we can connect them and actually get them starting to find their own business, come up with new business models in micro businesses and so on, I think there is a lot that can be done that actually will ease the life of so many people on this planet. So, I mean, if I would hope for something, that revolution would continue and that people actually get access to what that amazing, sorry.
Yeah. So
that's my wish list. So.
No, I think that's well. You've got a wall in the studio actually with the is it the UN or the World Health Organization? I think it's 17 key touch points around fundamental things like health and clean water and so forth, and they all seem to lead to that very thing you're talking about there, with kind of what the next 3 to 5 years is aiming to get to me. In many ways, I came away from the week with yourselves and the team with a clear view that a lot of the focus, even though there's a lot of business focus and a lot of technology focus for the obvious reason that you want to build the Ericsson brand and the business further and move with the trends, what was really reassuring for me personally anyway, and I'm keen to get your insight into this, is that I left with the sense that 99.9% of the focus was actually on improving lifestyle and livelihood. And a lot of the technology was being developed to put it in the hands of people and allow them to do things. You weren't necessarily saying, here's a mobile phone device, make a phone call with it. It's more a case of, here's a device, tell us what you can do with it, and let us know how we can improve that customer experience with it. Is that a fair assumption to sort of say that a lot of the focus, even though there's a commercial drive for the business and there's obviously a technical imperative to get better and better technology, is it fair to say that the focus is on just that humanity component around, I guess, entertainment and livelihood and lifestyle in general?
Well, I would like to say that we always have that focus, but of course we have a commercial aspect, as you mentioned as well. But still, I think when you try to sell a product, that is always more difficult than trying to tell the customer. So it can change your perspective and helping instead of selling, you would have to sell as well. So I think that's what we try to do also in our marketing material. We try to answer questions that people have rather than giving messages on things we think they need. So the whole mobility report, we've done that now a couple of years, and we don't mention Ericsson anywhere else than on the logo on the front. Because this is not about Ericsson. This is about explaining what we know so people can take that knowledge and run with it. And hopefully that is good for both us, the industry, and the business.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a trend in the last decade and certainly the last 3 years that I've noticed where there's a lot more telling and a lot less selling. Not just with Ericsson, but across the world and as a whole. Because I think, when we look at, even things in the advertising industry where people have done ad blocking for, cutting out ads in websites, and now there's applications on their phone that can block ads. And, people used to have little devices they'd plug to their TV that would record the shows they liked but cut out the ads. And I think what we ended up with was a tipping point where people were tired of being sold to. They wanted to be treated as intelligent humans and just be told what was possible and let them make the decision. And I think that was definitely the takeaway I had from the week with your team and crew in the studio. That outside, as you said, the drive to grow the business and all the commercials that come with that's a given, and the need to develop and grow technology. I was very reassured that my 13-year-old son and 16-year-old daughter's futures are going to be in good hands with Ericsson and the industry group. That we're going and we're building good things.
That's great.
Well,
and they will definitely use it. That's the thing. That they will. They are grown up and starting their life on a digital journey already from the start. So of course they have huge expectations that we need to deliver. And that's also one thing we talk about in the report. The millennials, how they grow up and will wanting to have more and more and more and expect a lot from the networks. So let's deliver on that.
Actually, I'd love you to give us a bit more insight into kind of what you learned about that. I mean, that's an exciting new section in the report. How did you come to add the millennial component to the report, and what are some of the key takeaways you gleaned from getting that data together?
Yeah, I mean, we try to have diversify our report and do a lot of different things. And this time we did a consumer study where we actually asked a lot of consumers. And then we realized that, hey, when we asked the people that are older compared to the ones that are more millennials, there's a difference in both how they feel that their need for network met by the network, but also their expectations on the future. So I think that was very interesting for us now when we noticed that, hey, this we should write about and make everyone understand. Because these guys, the millennials, I mean, 5, 10, 15 years from now, they are the purchasing power of the world. They will be the one paying the salaries for the new networks coming and the new industries happening and new businesses starting. So, of course, we need to look at what they need.
Absolutely. And I guess, just for folk listening, just to define, I mean, millennials, as you said in the report, I mean, these are folk that are born between the early 1980s, I guess, and then the sort of the early 2000s. And these are folk who are, in many ways, they're cloud natives in some way. They're digital natives. I mean, they've grown up, as you said in the report here, I'm quoting, in the age of the internet and mobile communication. So, they've actually not known the world without the internet, and they've not known the world without smartphones. I saw a funny meme video on YouTube recently that my son played to me, and he said, have a look at some of these kids, and they're listening to dial-up modem tones, and they're laughing because they thought it was hilarious that someone had to do that before they got connected to the internet. I remember my My son once said to me that he came from school and the maths teacher put an icon of a 3.5-inch floppy disk up there, and one of the kids put up his hand and said, why did you 3D print the save icon? So you're right. I mean, these are the next C-suites. These are the next executives. These are the next decision makers. But what's interesting as well is reading the data you had in the report. I mean, they're already decision makers in the consumer space because they may not be running the businesses that are buying the towers today. They might not be building the 50-story buildings, but they're already choosing that user experience thing you're talking about in the report. I mean, these are a big shift in the consumers. This is where a lot of money is going, and it's not just the West either. I mean, in your report you talk about areas from Argentina and Brazil and Egypt and Finland and all across Mexico, UK. I mean, South Korea. The millennials across the world, not just in the Western civilization, are bringing the same type of shift across. Is that a fair assumption? That it's the same basic shift, but it's happening worldwide?
Yes, definitely. And that's so interesting because they have many of these have grown up, as you say, with the digital screen on the fingertip. So they are doing things differently. And then we can start learning to do YouTube. We can start learning to do music streaming, so on in our age. But a funny story. I talked to my son, and he was using a lot of data on his mobile subscription. I wonder what is he doing, and then I realized after a while that he was actually listening to music through YouTube. I didn't even know you could do that, but he's doing that. And basically, he listened to music. He put the song on YouTube, which is basically a video then, and then put the phone in his pocket and just listen to the music. So he streams continuously every day for hours because he listens to music. And that's, I wouldn't even think about listening to music on a video stream application. I would talk about, hey, that's what you do for viewing video, not listening to music. So they are doing things differently, and I think that's something we have to understand.
Absolutely. I remember you mentioning that when we were there last week or the week before, and it really struck me. I actually wrote it down and started putting a short blog together, which maybe we can collaborate on about that topic, because my son's exactly the same. He's got his phone in his pocket, he's walking around, he's listening to music. And when you mentioned that, it reminded me that I've seen that, and I've constantly thought to myself, I should just ring Google and tell them to enable a feature that says audio only, so that they only push the audio stream and they cut out the video. That would save us a lot of internet pain. But anyway, I'm sure they're happy because there's video ads being promoted. Well, look, Patrik, that's been a fantastic half-an-hour conversation with you. Thank you so much for making time to catch up with me. Some amazing insights and a real pleasure to talk about not just you and your role, but also some of the things you do outside of work around golf and listening to jazz and your crime and mystery books, but also learning a bit about the role you play. And really appreciate the insights you've given us into the mobility report. Anyone who hasn't downloaded the Ericsson mobility report should go and do that straight away. It's on my Twitter feed as well. It's easy to Google. Look, thank you very much, Patrik. It's been great to have you in the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Dez, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure, and we'll get you on the show again. And with that, folks, we're going to wrap up. It's been a fantastic half-an-hour fireside chat with Patrik Cerwall, the Head of Strategic Marketing for the Business Area Network section of Ericsson. He's over in Kista, about 20 minutes out of Stockholm in Sweden. I'm here in Sydney. I think it's the start of your day there and the end of mine here. And Patrik, with that, we'll wrap it up, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.